I did mention, I'm Akiva Zablocki. I'm founder of a startup called Health 2 Social. We haven't launched yet. We're launching soon. The purpose of the startup is to help empower patients with the right tools that they can make the best decisions possible when they're faced diagnoses like cancer or brain tumor or another terrible illness. I'm also on the board of the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation. The Children's Brain Tumor Foundation is a national foundation founded in 1988 whose mission is to improve the treatment, quality of life, and long-term outlook for children and brain and spinal cord tumors through research, education, support, and advocacy to the families and survivors. And I'll go into more details about that later, but first, what brought me here today, my personal story. Like some other people in the audience today, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. This was back in the summer of 2005. I was a college student at Columbia University. I had just finished a successful junior year. I had just been elected as senior class president for my senior year, and I had a lot of things planned, and I had a lot of ideas of how this would be like the most amazing senior year. Over the summer, I actually spent overseas. I was leading a trip to Israel. I had grown up there and I knew the country, so I was leading a trip of 40 other students there, and I started to see double. And I don't know if anybody else here has ever seen double, but it's a very weird feeling. Being a college kid on vacation, I assumed that it had to do with how much fun I was having. But it didn't go away. And after the trip, I decided that it's worth checking into. So I went to an eye doctor there, and they told me that my eyes looked fine, something going on with my nerves. So he sent me to a neurologist who then had me do an MRI. And I came back from the MRI and I heard the 9 words that nobody ever wants to hear. I'm sorry, but you have a brain tumor. Truth is, he never said those words that day. He said I had a brain lesion, which was his way, I think, of nicely saying that I guess he didn't want to tell me right then that I had a brain tumor, but after they looked at it again in the MRI, they saw it was a polycystic astrocytoma, which was a 2-centimeter brain tumor. But like with the real estate market, a lot when you get diagnosed with brain tumors has to do with the same rules that govern real estate: location, location, location. And square footage is probably important as well. So mine was in prime location. It was inside the brainstem, which is one of the most important parts of the brain. It controls most of the cranial nerves that run through your body, that control your breathing, your heart rate, your movement, your balance. Everything runs through the brainstem. So when there's damage there, and I had a big tumor in the middle of it, it's not the best thing, out there. At the time, the doctor in Israel told me that surgery did not look like it was a possibility because no one would really ever want to cut healthy tissue in the brainstem to get to my tumor. I flew back to New York, where I was living and going to college, and I started seeing the best doctors in the world. And I started seeing doctor after doctor, neurosurgeon, neuro-oncologist, radiation oncologist, and all the doctors I saw in New York and then started spreading out to Boston and California, sending out my MRIs, all came back to me and said the basic thing was that surgery would never be a possibility. No one would cut through my healthy brain stem, which is very dangerous to cut, to get to the tumor. And they were offering me solutions like, let's wait and see how fast it grows, and then maybe do surgery if it comes out of there. They also mentioned at the time that radiation probably wouldn't work for this kind of tumor, and chemo wouldn't work either. As the summer progressed, my symptoms progressed as well. So besides double vision, I started feeling numb in my hand, in my arm, and my legs started falling asleep, my vocal cords started swelling, and I realized that the tumor was growing. And 3 months later, the MRI did show the tumor had grown over 50%. At that point, the same doctors I had seen, over 30 of them, came back and said that radiation should be what we should do, or chemotherapy, and offered me different types. Again, surgery, they said, wouldn't be compatible with life. That's when I realized that there was a problem in the healthcare system, and it wasn't the problems that Obama is trying to solve now with healthcare reform, which are important, insurance access and costs, but it was a problem of asymmetric information. People get diagnosed and the doctors have all the information and we don't have a lot, and we don't know how to make a choice as far as what should I choose. Should I listen to Dr. A telling me radiation, Dr. B telling me chemo? how do I find a solution? And none of the solutions would have been something that would have saved my life. And that's when I created a team. Team involved my family, my friends, 2 doctors, a rabbi. Everyone came together and started doing research with me. And we were able to find in Arizona a doctor, a neurosurgeon, that said, I could do your surgery. I could cut the brainstem, I could take the whole tumor out. So I came to my doctors in New York and told them, I found this great surgeon out in Arizona, I want to go have surgery there. What do you guys think about that? And they all said, that is not a possibility. This guy must be a cowboy, he must be taking risks. It's not worth taking the risk of, a life-threatening surgery or that would leave me in a disability state that I wouldn't be able to walk and talk and breathe on my own. I decided to fly down there and talk to him in person, figure out why he felt that he could do this surgery. And I came down and I said to him, Dr. Spetzler, are your knives sharper? Do you have steadier hands, better machines? Why could you do this surgery that no one else in New York, which have some of the best hospitals in the world, say they could do? And he told me straight out, my knives aren't sharper, my tools aren't better. I've just been doing this, and I've been doing this for over 30 years, cutting the brainstem, and I've published over 200 brainstem surgeries. And that's when I realized another problem in the healthcare field is that good surgeons around the globe will spend most of their time doing surgeries and seeing patients, and they don't always have the time to know what the other person down in Arizona might be doing. And reading all the medical journals that come out so much, they mentioned if you want to keep up with all the medical journals, you'll have to be reading constantly and never actually seeing patients. So I decided at the time to trust this doctor. I was in my 20s, I was young, didn't have as many responsibilities, didn't have a pregnant wife with a kid on the way. So I decided to go down to Arizona with my family and have surgery. Surgery was a great success. The surgeon was able to take the whole tumor out, which means there was no residue, it didn't need chemotherapy, it didn't need radiation to fix it afterwards. But there were complications during surgery. And I ended up waking up only 4 days later after being in an induced coma and spending another 10 days in the ICU. When I woke up, I was basically paralyzed in half my body. I couldn't breathe on my own, I couldn't walk, talk, I couldn't do anything. It was like I was reborn, like a baby. And I went through a process there of learning how to swallow on my own, learning how to get up and sit up, learning how to take my first steps in the hospital in Arizona. And then they sent me back to New York to continue rehabilitation in an acute facility in New York, where I spent every day going in a wheelchair through sessions with physical therapists, learning how to walk, learning how to talk, learning how to dress myself. I mentioned I grew up in Israel. I served in the Israeli military. I did basic training as a combat soldier there. I thought that was the hardest thing I've ever done, and recovering from brain surgery and learning everything again knocks that out of the park. But after a month in rehab, being young, my body recovered, and I was let out with a walker, and then I started walking with a cane. I went back to school, went back to being class president. But I came out a pirate, and I'm not connected to the pirate ride over there. But I had a new identity. I was the guy that survived the brain tumor. I decided that I should devote my life to raising awareness of this terrible disease and helping other people that are also diagnosed. I started a blog called iPatchman. iPatch is spelled with a small I, big P, where I created this persona, this superhero that survives a brain tumor, and I told my story. And I continued blogging about my recovery and about how I made my choices. I even created a shirt that has my brain before and after, and raising awareness. And that really paid off, because other patients contact me all the time. They find me online, they're Googling their conditions, they come across my website, and they ask me for advice. Just an example, a couple of years ago, a 25-year-old law student in Canada contacted me saying that he has the same tumor as me in the same location. And he was me 3 years earlier, because he had done everything that was recommended to me. He had done the radiation and the chemotherapy, and nothing worked on his tumor. And he was basically told that he has 2 years to live, he should go home to live with his parents and live out the rest of his life in peace. And that's when he found my blog, and we connected, and I said, listen, I'm not sure my surgeon could help you, but it's worth a try. And he connected with my surgeon in Arizona, had surgery there on his brainstem as well. recovered and finished law school and is working as a lawyer now in Canada. And that kind of reaffirmed my feelings about what I wanted to do with my life. I mentioned that I'm on the board of the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation. We interact every day with parents of young children being diagnosed, and we connect them with other parents that have been through this process. And that's something that to me was the solution, connecting socially. I named my startup Health to Social because I felt that being in the patient world, connecting with other patients like Rick, and hearing their stories and hearing how they made their decisions will help everybody. So part of the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation, we connect people with other parents. There's a lot of survivorship programming. And I work on my own startup. And my own startup relates to how you make choices when you get diagnosed with a severe illness. So I'm sure many of you have bought a car maybe in the last 10 years. So if you were going to buy a car, you would probably go online and start doing consumer reports, look up websites, figure out what the best mileage you're going to get, what the safety features are for your kids and your family. You'll probably talk to your friends and figure out how they like their car. How's that Mazda? How's that, Ford? And then you would go to some dealerships and you would drive different cars in the dealership and get a feel for the choice you're making, because you're about to spend a lot of money on a car and it's a big commitment. Fortunately, when people get diagnosed with cancer, they don't make the choices in the same way. Sometimes they don't have the luxury, but even when they do have the time, they usually make a decision with the first or second options. And if they're bold, they go to a third opinion. So my startup is going to focus on connecting patients to other patients and giving that advice and that help to find the best treatment possible out there. There's a whole movement going on now called the e-patient movement. I'll just read the exact definition of the e-patient. E-patients are equipped patient. They're empowered, engaged, equipped, and enabled. They're patients that walk into the doctor's office with the information because they did the research, and they understand that the relationship between the doctor and the patient is an equal relationship, and they work together on finding the best solution out there, and they talk with different doctors and they figure out the best care for themselves or for their family. I got my master's in public health at Columbia University, worked in consulting for several years in the private sector, and now I'm working on this startup. And I encourage you, everyone, to check out my website, health2social.com, or my blog, iPatchman.com. And I hope everyone enjoys this day. This is a really important event, raising awareness for brain tumors and pediatric brain tumors, and raising money for the National Brain Tumor Society is a really important. I hope everyone spends a lot of money on raffle tickets. And thank you for listening to my story. Thank you, Rick, for inviting me.